Oh my god, a nuclear bomb just went off. What am I gonna do? I have no plan! If you're interested in learning how to protect yourself and your family from radiation and fallout, this is the video for you. If you're new to prepping, this is the video for you. Or if you're just someone that likes watching a prepper play with Lego toys, this is the video for you. I'm Practice Prepper. We're going to talk about all that stuff in this video today, and we're going to do it in a way that's very accessible. One of the biggest critiques that I get of my channel recently is that a lot of the stuff that I do on my channel is kind of inaccessible to people. It makes sense. I've been doing this for many, many years, and the types of things that I'm working on for myself that I like sharing here on my channel are oftentimes, well, it's been a long time since I've put together a bug out bag for myself. That is like decades ago for me. I'm working on other things. But that doesn't mean that this stuff isn't important to share with people that are just starting out. And a lot of these things are not as difficult as you might imagine, including, you know, the terrible situation that a lot of people are talking about right now, which is, you know, preparing for a potential situation with radioactive fallout, all that kind of stuff. So what we're going to do in this video is, if you're someone that's new to prepping and you want to be able to, you know, have some kind of a plan for that, that's totally possible. I think a lot of people think that it's just so dreadful, so unconceivable that there's just no reason to even really make any plans for it. And, you know, depending on the situation, yeah, that might be the case. If a nuclear bomb goes off over your head, you know, no amount of plans are going to really help you. You're going to get, you know, fried to a crisp. But there's a lot of perimeter areas where if you do put in some effort, it is actually going to be somewhat helpful for you. So I've got a model here of a basement. If you have a basement, we're going to talk about some things that you can do to make that basement be a pretty darn functional fallout shelter. Here's what we got for you here. We've got little Mr. Lego here, and he's just gotten the news. There's been some type of nuclear event and there's fallout headed for his area. Everything is not awesome. So this guy is running around like with his head cut off like a terrified chicken. So, oh my God, I can't believe this has happened. I never planned on anything like this happening in my whole life. I have no idea what I'm gonna do. I have no plan, blah. Okay, so, you know, is this guy totally screwed? Well, you know, the answer is he probably is, but there are a lot of things that you can do to make your odds a little bit better. So I've got this kind of basement here, and I got a little wall that slides out, and we're going to talk a little bit about things that you can do to your basement to make it a pretty functional fallout shelter. Just using things that you have on hand. I've been working on my fallout shelter to try to improve it for the situation that's you know, occurring right now. And while I spent a fair bit of money getting the fallout shelter structure itself put together, I think it was somewhere around like $11,000 for like the concrete and the backfill and all the excavation, all that kind of stuff. It's a fair bit of money, but the stuff that I'm doing right now is free stuff that only takes my time. And we're going to talk about a lot of those things. What I've been doing is putting extra shielding on top, which is, you know, rotted logs soaked with water, dirt, rocks, stones, like all that kind of stuff, pieces of scrap metal that I found around. A lot of the stuff that you can do to protect yourself from radiation is entirely free, and you can just kind of pick up essentially junk that's around you on the ground. There are three things that you need to be aware of when you want to protect yourself from radiation. One is you want to stay as far away from it as possible. In distance, you want to have the most amount of distance between you and the particle. If you think about a flashlight, if you put the flashlight right in your face, it's radiating light energy at you, and it's really bright. But as you move that flashlight away, it's the same amount of energy that's being emitted out of that flashlight, but less and less is hitting you because more of it is going off in other directions. So you want to get the most distance between yourself and radioactive fallout material. The other thing you want to do is reduce the amount of time that you're exposed to that radioactive fallout material. If you are into photography, you know that if you are taking a photograph, you can have different shutter speeds. A longer shutter speed allows more light to come in and impact the film or the emulsion if you're using old-fashioned photography. And a shorter shutter speed has less of that light come in. If you can think of your exposure to radiation as being a shutter speed, the faster that shutter opens and closes, the less light is coming through, the less radiation is coming through, and the less exposure that you have to that radiation. So you want to increase your distance and decrease the amount of time that you're exposed to radiation. The third thing that you can do, and this is what we're going to talk about primarily in this video, is to increase the amount of stuff between you and that radiation. And by stuff, I just mean atoms. Anything that has weight, anything that has mass is it's full of atoms. And the more of those atoms you can put between yourself and a radioactive fallout particle, the more protection that you're going to have. Now, different materials have different what's called a halving thickness. Now, lead is super heavy, it's super dense, it's got a lot of atoms packed in there. So the amount of lead that it takes to block half of the radiation coming off of a piece of fallout. I think, don't quote me on this. I'll put the actual information on the screen. I think it's about 1 centimeter or something like that. I'll put the actual thing on the screen right here. But the idea is that it doesn't really matter exactly what the halving thickness is. The halving thickness for concrete is about 2.5 inches. Halving thickness for dirt is about 3.5 inches. And all those halving thicknesses, there's a lot of math there and can get a little bit overwhelming. But the idea is the heavier something is and the more of it you put between yourself and that radiation, the better off that you're going to be. So what we're going to talk about is how you could construct something in your basement. Presuming you have a basement. I know people complain about my channel all the time. It's like, oh, I don't have a fallout shelter, so that's not good for me. I don't have this, so that's not good for me. I don't have that, so that's not good for me. To some degree, there's only so much there are only so many things that you can not possess and still, have a functional situation. I feel, oftentimes I feel like, people are coming to me saying, I'm pissed drunk. I don't have any money. I cut off, 3 of my legs. And I need to get home, and I'm like in some other city. At some point you've created so many problems for yourself that the solution gets harder and harder. Now, if you weren't drunk, you could drive yourself. If you weren't piss poor, you could get a cab. But if you compound all these things and you're in a situation where it's like, I want to protect myself from radiation, but I live out in the middle of a field and I don't want to bother doing anything. And, what can I do to be safe in the middle of a field covered in fallout ash? You got to put some effort in, and you got to meet people halfway. So we're going to talk about people who have a basement to start with. A basement's a pretty good environment, and we're going to talk about how to kind of improve that environment. So here's the model I've got right here, and here's that crazy guy. He's kind of running around. He doesn't know what to do, but there's a lot of things that he can do. First off, I'm going to swing the wall back here, and we're going to talk about what we have on top of us here. We've got the floor, the top floor of the house. Now we're going to say that this basement is, a buried basement, and we're going to talk a little bit about a walkout basement in a little bit. So we've got dirt all around the sides here, and there might be fallout material out on the ground here. And there's oftentimes leaks in houses, so there's probably fallout material, and it might be falling onto the floor up here. So what this guy down here, what he has to worry about is fallout that's kind of coming from this top a few inches of the foundation, where these basement casement windows are. He's got to worry about some fallout coming through there because let's say there's an 8 or a 10-inch thick concrete wall. Let's go with 10 inches because the math's a little bit easier. My concrete foundation wall is a 10-inch one. 10 inches is 4 halving thicknesses of concrete. We said that 2.5 inches is a halving thickness for concrete. So what you're going to do with any radiation that's coming through this concrete, you're going to cut it in half and then cut it in half again, cut it in half again, cut it in half again. So you're going to be down to, what's that, 1/2, 1/4, 1/8, 1/16. So just coming through just the radiation coming through the concrete here, he's going to be, if he's just standing right here, he's going to be exposed to only 1/16 of the radiation that's outside. That's a pretty good cut, but you're going to want to go better than that. Plus, you get this little basement casement window here, and that's not going to offer much protection at all. So we're going to talk a little bit about those. But he has to be concerned about radiation coming through the top area of the foundation here, and radiation that might have settled on the floor, on the top floor up here. So what we're going to be doing is building a shield that is going to protect him from the top few inches of the foundation and the floor above him, okay? And what we're going to do to create that is just use materials that you either have on hand or don't cost very much, and specifically, they're materials that have multiple uses. I'm a huge fan of having my preps be useful for different sorts of things. In fact, my fallout shelter was built as a root cellar, and a root cellar I can use for storing crops, and it's been very helpful and useful in that regard. So I love preps that aren't just useful for one thing. You can use them for lots of things. So the materials that we're going to talk about implementing to create this, they're all things that, once this situation kind of passes, and hopefully it does very soon, I wouldn't hold my breath on that, but hopefully it does very soon. You know, the materials that we're acquiring for this, they're all things that you can do stuff with. So it's not a wasted investment because you're going to have these materials, you can do other things with them. So the first thing we're going to talk about is cinder blocks. I'm going to use this piece to represent a cinder block. You know, cinder blocks usually have a couple of holes in the side, and cinder blocks are made of concrete. It's not the densest concrete in the world. It's very porous, but we're not going to rely on the cinder block for its radiation blocking potential, you know, although it will be offering some of that. We're going to be using the cinder block as a way of holding up our structure. What we want to do is we want to take our guy here, and we want to be able to have him have kind of like a place where he can shelter and lie down, where he's going to be protected mostly from what's coming above, because the radiation is going to be coming down at him. It's not going to be coming from the sides because all these walls are all safe. And the nice thing about radiation, the nice thing, is that it doesn't change direction midair. I mean, you know, never say never, but it doesn't change direction midair. It moves in a straight path, and it continues in that straight path until it gets blocked by something, until it hits an atom. So if we had, for example, radiation kind of coming down this stair, it's not going to come down the stairs and then bank a 90-degree turn and then you know, hit him from the side. So all of our radiation in this environment is going to be generally coming down from the top down to the bottom. So what we want to do for this guy is we want to create kind of a little tube, and he's going to be able to use this for multiple things. At the peak of the event, which is like the first couple hours, first couple days, he's going to want to stay in that tube as much as he possibly can, because there's going to be a high amount of radiation outside if, you know, he's in an area where there's a higher amount of radiation. Even after that time, this tube is going to serve as a great place for him to sleep at night. And that gets to that kind of second point, I think it was the second point that we talked about, where you want to reduce the amount of time that you're exposed to radiation. Now, let's say the first couple days have gone by, you know, first 3 or 4 days, and, you know, for whatever, he's got to get out of there, he's got things to do. You know, he just wants to get up and be like a post-apocalyptic movie and look out the window and be like, the world's changed forever, something like that. You know, he wants to get out of there, he wants to move around. Now, he can do that a little bit, understanding that he is going to be exposed to some level of radiation while he is prancing around doing his like movie character thing, looking out at the horrifying vistas. But if he can limit that amount of time where he's up there and spend more time down here, especially when he's asleep. When you're asleep, you know, for 8 hours, that's like a good third of every day. If you can take a third of your day and spend it in a very safe environment, that's going to be a really good idea. So what this is going to be for is it's a place you can be for the first couple days, certainly for the first several hours, and it's going to be a place where you can sleep possibly for a couple of weeks, depending on, you know, if there are multiple events that keep, you know, kind of happening over and over. So we're going to build something for him right here. Now, the location of where you put this, this structure is going to be a little dependent on your specific basement. We mentioned that these basement casement windows here are going to be allowing more radiation in, and certainly if you have a walkout basement, and I got this little thing to simulate a door here. Let's say that you come down the stairs here, and this is a walkout basement. So over on this side of the basement, the ground isn't you know, 6 feet or 7 feet high. You know, this is not a buried basement wall. You can walk right through this door, or kick it down, and you're right on the outside. If that's the case, you wouldn't be getting any extra protection on all of this height of the wall, because on the other side of this wall, if you have just a door right there, you don't have any dirt protecting you. So all you would have is those 4 halving thicknesses of concrete. So if that's the case, you would want to build your structure far away from this wall, kind of pointed away from it. So let's pretend that this is kind of a walk-up basement. We're going to build our structure over on this side, and we're going to have it face this wall here, which we're going to say this is a completely buried wall. The level of dirt is like up here. So this is all dirt, and there's pretty much no radiation coming through the wall down here, okay? So we've got this guy, and he wants to build a little bed for himself. So we're going to do that out of concrete bricks. So the way to do that is just make a little row for yourself, and got a couple of these kind of pre-prepared here. Make a couple of stacks, and you're not going to want to make the gap between these stacks any more than like, you know, 2.5 feet. You know, you could maybe stretch it a little bit further than that. We're going to talk about how far you can stretch it in a little bit. But you're going to want to keep this gap pretty minimal, and the reason isn't because we're trying to make you feel as uncomfortable as possible, though that will be a side effect. The reason that we want to do that is because this is going to be holding up weight. And you don't want to have an enormous amount of span between these if you're going to put a lot of weight on top, because you don't want to kill yourself by having the weight crushed down through what we're going to put on top of here in order to, to hold things up. So we've got 2 rows of concrete bricks, and we can put some at the far end over here to kind of block over there. I think I have a few more of these guys here. I'll use some of these here. So we've got protection from this side, protection from this side, protection from this side, and mostly, like we said, we want to have protection from the top, from the energy coming down from the top. And the best way to do that would be with some boards. Now, I would suggest 2x4s because they're not, I mean, the prices of everything is super expensive right now. But compared to other boards, they are not super expensive. They can hold a decent amount of weight, and especially if you were to stack a couple of layers of them, I think they could do pretty well. And also, the nice thing about 2x4s is they're a really useful piece of lumber. So if you were to dismantle this later, you're having a bunch of 2x4s, you're going to have a really useful type of lumber. Now, I would suggest doing 2 rows of 2x4s, and I've got these little blocks to simulate a 2x4, kind of staggering our joints. If we're going to use these to go between our cinder blocks, this would be 1 layer of 2x4s going between. If you get 1 row bricks here and 1 row bricks here, pop, up, like that. Now, if you want to put a second layer on here, don't do it like that. What you want to do is stagger the joints. That is going to really share the load across all the entire surface, and it's going to be a much more effective way of carrying load on top. So you don't want to do something kind of like that. And these don't have to be secured in any particular way. All they need to do is to be, I'll move this back a little bit. All they need to do is, be laid there, and gravity is going to hold them in place pretty darn well because there's going to be a lot of weight on top. Now, if you live in an earthquake zone, there are other considerations. I don't personally live in an earthquake zone. If you live in an earthquake zone, that might be something you want to take into consideration in terms of how much you would want to secure this stuff. But one thing I would do is I would not make this any higher than you absolutely have to make it, the stack of cinder blocks here. The higher this is, the more unstable it's going to be. So make this the absolute minimum height that it possibly can be for you to be comfortable in your little tube here. And keep in mind, you're going to be on a basement floor here, so you're going to want some kind of a pad to lay on, not just for like the soft comfort of it, but also for temperature. Basement floors can be cold, so you're going to want to make sure that you have a room to fit some kind of a pad, and you're going to have blankets and things like that if you're going to want to stay warm. So we got this guy, and he's in there, and because he's a Lego person, his arms can't really move, so he can't totally fit in there. But I think you get the idea that he's in here. Now, you would want your entire body. Well, we can fix that actually. The benefit of Lego people is their arms can tear off. All right, so he's got a whole new reason to scream now. Okay, so he can fit all the way in there, and you definitely want to get your head in there because your brain is very important. At least most people's brains are very important. So we've got some planks across there, and that's going to protect him. The next thing we want to do is get something real on top of there, because what is on there right now is just a couple of pieces of wood, and wood is not a particularly good radiation blocker. Okay, so we're going to want to put some other stuff on top, and that is where you can kind of start getting creative. There are all sorts of things that you can put in there, and if your basement is like most people, there's probably a lot of boxes and junk and stuff like that in your basement already. And if you have like tubs or anything like that, you can stack those right on top and fill those with stuff. And there's also, I'm just going to get this door out of here. You get the idea. There's a walkout basement. And there's all sorts of things that you can put in there to put more stuff in there. And the idea, again, is the more weight, the more atoms, the more stuff, the better you're going to do. So when you're trying to figure out, well, what's a good material, what's not a good material, lift it up. If it's heavy, it's a good material, especially if it can stack really tightly with other things. If you can stack them next to each other with very little gap, that's going to be better. If you have kind of weirdo shapes and they don't really fit, tightly next to each other, you're going to have these gaps and radiation is going to plunge right through there. So you're going to want to put stuff in there that packs pretty tightly. And one great thing for that is just dirt. You can just fill these guys up with dirt, and the more you pack the dirt in there, step on it or whatever, and really press the dirt in there, the more you're going to be able to pack more and more atoms into that space. Now, there's a couple different ways of getting the dirt in. One thing that the guy could do is try to bring a wheelbarrow full of dirt down into his basement. I think that's probably a pretty horrible idea because it's ripe for having there be an accident. I think that would not work very well. I think the best way to do it would probably be to use a bucket. Bring some buckets down, and you could bring things down that way. What you probably don't want to do is you probably don't want to take your bins, fill them with dirt outside, and then try to carry them, because your goal is to make them as heavy as you possibly can, and then they'd be really hard to bring down. So I think you're going to want to be filling them while they're down there. Other things that you can put in these guys, let's forget about the dirt for now. Rocks. You can put big rocks in there. Rocks are like concrete. They're even better than dirt. The one problem with the rocks is that they don't pack as tightly as dirt does. So one thing you might want to do is kind of do a mix where you put in some dirt, take a bunch of rocks that you can find, pack the rocks all in there, put more dirt, pack more rocks, so that all the gaps between the rocks is all filled with dirt. Other things that are useful, let's get these guys out of here. Let's say you don't have access to dirt. Whatever, we're just trying to, what if here. What are some other things you could do? Well, if you had like giant jugs of water, water is pretty heavy. There's a lot of atoms in there, and water is actually a pretty effective radiation blocker. So you can, if you have jugs of water, you could stack jugs of water all over the top there. I'm using this to simulate books. Like just books are a lot. If you've ever tried to pick up a whole bunch of books, books are paper, paper is wood. Wood is not the absolute best material for blocking radiation, but it still has a fair degree of weight to it. And if there's some kind of books that you really don't care about, if you soak them in water, they would be even more effective. So anything you can put on here that has some weight. And I think a lot of people in their basement, they just have lots of stuff. Once you kind of cover up the entire top of your surface with as much stuff as you can put on there, and you're going to be wanting to watch these 2x4s. If they start sagging in any way, that's a sign that you probably don't want to put any more weight on there unless you add like another layer. You don't have to stop at 2 layers of these things. You could even do 3 layers of 2x4s. And if you did that, again, you would want to kind of stagger them back and forth the whole way, sort of like that, all the way up, so that you're really distributing the load. If you have plenty of 2x4s on the top, you're going to be able to put an awful lot of weight there, but watch for the sag. If they start sagging, that's a sign that you're going to kill yourself by other means, by crushing yourself. In terms of just other stuff that you have, boxes of junk or whatever, you can put that stuff all around the sides, sort of stack it up. I mean, everyone's got treasure chests in their basement, right? Gold is pretty dense. You got your boxes of gold or silver bullion or whatever, you can do that. And just, whatever, once you finish with this, if you got a snowboard, throw a snowboard on top. Anything that's more atoms is going to be more protection for you. Okay, so that gives you kind of a place where you can pop in, you can sleep, you can spend the first couple days there. That's going to give you an awful lot of protection from all of the radiation that has settled down on the ground outside. The worst of the radiation is at the beginning, and the reason for that is that the things that throw off the most radiation are throwing it off quickly, and because they're throwing it off quickly, they run out of bullets, so to speak, pretty fast. So it's those first couple of days you need to be the most concerned about. But it's not just outside that you have to be thinking about in terms of radiation. It's also inside. Most people's houses are not hermetically sealed. If they were, a lot of people would suffocate to death. So it's kind of good that people's houses are not completely airtight. But let's presume that there's going to be some level of air incursion that's going to be getting into your basement. Let's presume that you're going to have some amount of outside air kind of leaking into your inside environment. What do you do about that? Some of that air is possibly going to have radioactive particles in it, and the best thing that you can do at that point is to filter the air. I'm using this to simulate a little air filter. If you have acquired a indoor house air filter during the recent disease outbreak that I can't say by name because apparently it makes it very difficult for my my subscribers to get any notifications about my channel. So you have to be, I guess, cloak and dagger about it, although all too little, all too late for me, because I've already like poisoned the well. Anyway, if you have an indoor air filter, you can position that in your basement environment. And what I would do is I would suggest taking this and putting it away from your structure. You want to have this as far away from you as you can. I'm going to put this back over here. And the reason for that is that that thing's job is to collect radioactive particles. You don't want to be collecting radioactive particles in your filter and have the thing sitting right next to your head, irradiating your head. So if you have an indoor air filter, put it kind of far away from you, and consider that if it's serving any purpose there at all, other than just like insurance, if it actually is functioning to filter radiation out of the air, you're going to want to consider that thing to be a radioactive item. You want to kind of stay away from that thing. Okay. So that gives you an environment that is reasonably safe from radiation, at least a heck of a lot better than if you didn't have anything at all. You're cleaning your air out, and the other thing you want to think about is having supplies right down there in that environment. You're going to want to have water, and that's one of the great things. If you have a lot of water jugs, they can be used as radiation shielding, and then they can also be used as something to drink later. Having the energy of radiation pass through water doesn't make the water radioactive. What makes the water radioactive is if radioactive dust and particles get into the water. If you have sealed containers of water and you're just using them to block radiation, that radiation doesn't change the water in any way that's going to be dangerous to you. I just found this, and I should mention this too. Sandbags are another great, I mean, that's kind of like obvious. If you have sandbags would be a great way of putting some weight over the top of your structure there as well. So there are some other things that you're going to want to do in terms of keeping yourself safe, and those relate to various things that you can take internally. One of those that you hear about a lot is potassium iodine. The scientific formula for that is Ki, K for potassium, I for iodine. Ki pills. Potassium iodine pills are very common in terms of, like, if there was a nuclear meltdown at a nuclear facility, potassium iodine pills are preemptively given out to people in the fallout zone from nuclear power plants. It's a very popular thing to have, and it protects you from the uptake of radioactive iodine, which is a common byproduct of byproduct suggests that it's not intended. I mean, the whole idea with nuclear weapons is to harm and injure and maim people, so maybe it's not a byproduct. But radioactive iodine is something that arises when a nuclear bomb is detonated, and you can protect yourself from it by saturating your thyroid with the non-radioactive iodine in potassium iodine pills. You can buy those. They're super expensive at the moment. You can also, there are also other ways that you can get iodine into your system. You need to know what you're doing about that. I'm not going to talk about that in this video, mostly because there have been a lot of really excellent videos made on that topic. I know that Canadian Prepper has put out a couple. I would highly recommend his. He's teamed up with, it's a team of 2 doctors. One of them's named Nurse Amy, I believe. But they've put out a lot of really great videos. I would highly recommend watching those. And even more than that, because I know someone else has done an even deeper dive. Hoople's Cat has done an excellent video, to the point, it's a specific video. I'm going to put a link to it in the cards. It'll just pop up here or down in the description below, whichever works for you. Check out that video. He goes through a lot of other things you can get in addition to just potassium iodine tablets that are probably a pretty darn good idea. And Hoople's Cat does his research. He's someone that he's one of those people that if he says something, it is worth an awful lot. He does his research, he knows what he's talking about. That doesn't mean that we always see eye to eye on everything, but I have a great degree of respect for his opinion on everything, and I always give it a lot of weight in my own considerations. And I would highly recommend you check out his video on different things you can buy ahead of time to help protect your body from any radiation that it might inadvertently absorb, during this process, or when you're walking around with your arms cut off, looking at the post-apocalyptic wasteland. So I hope that you found this video helpful. Even if you are new to prepping, even if this is something that you're just jumping into, there's a lot. I know there's a lot there, but the basics are: make sure that you have access to food, make sure you have access to water. have a way of protecting yourself from radiation if that's what you're concerned about. If there's other concerns, there's other ways of protecting yourself using other tools, which I think you're not supposed to say on YouTube either, or it gives your channel problems. Whatever is legal and acceptable in your area. Think about those basics: food, shelter, safety, and with radiation, it's distance from the stuff. Limit the amount of time you're exposed to it, and put as much stuff, as much atoms, as much weight between you and that stuff as you possibly can. I hope you found this video helpful, and if you have any other suggestions on common things around the house that are heavy, that have a lot of density, that could be put around someone's shelter to help them, put them down in the comments below. I'd love to hear them. One that I hear an awful lot, and I think is a great idea, is canned foods. Canned foods are heavy, they're dense. If you stack your canned foods all around you, not only do you have them proximal and they're in the area that you need to be surviving in, but you're also providing some extra weight, some extra shielding for what's around you. So if you have any of your own ideas, please put them down in the comments below. Thanks for watching. This episode has been brought to you in part by Prescott Caliber Club and Jeske Defense Strategies. Prescott Caliber Club is a federally licensed firearm manufacturer and retail store specializing in firearms, survival gear, and producing great online content. If you want to thank them for supporting this channel, go check them out at PrescottCalClub.com. Please subscribe and tune in every Friday at 4:30 New York time for a new video. And if you'd like to support this channel, you can do so both through Patreon or PayPal.